Hello, this is the video of the adaptation of material and content that I decided to do for this course. Yeah, I thought of a problem that I had and I thought of a way to solve it. So I will tell you about my teaching context, the content that caused the problem I had, and my plan to solve it in terms of time and materials. Also, I will tell you about the connections I could establish between the solution and literature. And so here we go. My teaching context. Well, I teach English at an English teacher training program here in Chillán. The college where I work is called Universidad Adventista de Chile, and there I work with a group of pre-intermediate level learners. They take a course called Estructura del Idioma Inglés 2, which is a grammar course, and this grammar course has 3 hours per week, 3 pedagogical hours per week. The group that I decided to work with for this project is a group of 14 students. Yes, they are in first year, so English is something new for them. And structure, like grammar, is a very hard course for them. Well, the content that I had problems with this semester was the use of causative verbs. Yes, I had anticipated the problems that I was going to have because I knew that, well, according to literature, the aspects that languages do not have in common bring problems for learners. Generally, the similarities between the languages, like let's say our mother tongue and the second language we want to acquire, the similarities between those two languages will always offer possibilities to learn easier, but the differences between those languages will always represent difficulties. And so I had anticipated these difficulties because I know that the causative use of verbs does not exist in Spanish. In fact, we don't even have a name for that in Spanish. So here we are, causative verbs. Well, I had told my students that causative verbs were used for services that someone does, that someone did or will do for us. Now, there are different structures. We have the structure of have and get something done, the structure of get plus ing. We can also use the structure of getting someone to do something for us or have someone do something for us. Now, according to the program, I had to include all these structures. And the course syllabus gave me just one class to do this. One class of 3 pedagogical hours to do this. Yes. I had anticipated difficulties in terms of the time allotted for this. But anyways, I tried to do my best the first class. It didn't work well, so I thought of extending the time to 2 classes and a half. And even though I used that time, I had a lot of difficulties and probably I didn't get the goal. I didn't get to the objective I had the program established for this. So that was my problem. First of all, in the grammar course, we do not have a textbook. The university has different kinds of texts, grammar books in the library. One of them is called Destination, Grammar and Vocabulary. I use the B2 level for this. I know it's a pre-intermediate level group. but we do not have the B1 version of this book. We just have that. So because of that, I decided to include the Macmillan English Grammar. That one is for intermediate learners. Well, the book says it is for intermediate learners, but in fact it is not. I think several units of the book are designed in a way that pre-intermediate learners can perfectly deal with them. I also used the Macmillan English Grammar in Context for advanced learners, which, same as the first one, can be used for intermediate learners. And I used some handouts I found on the web. Of course, I adapted them as much as I could to create the material for the unit. Yeah, I started giving my students a handout for them to read. The handout included the theory, the selection of the theory I had found. In this theory, of course, since the program suggested all the structures I had to cover, I decided to include the structures the program suggested. There was an explanation, there were plenty of examples, but the handout didn't have exercises. I assigned the reading of the handout before the lesson. So let's say I finished with a passive voice today, I gave the handout as homework, and so next session, that was 1 week afterwards, they had to report what they had read. And that's what I did. And so they reported what they had read, but students could not distinguish their weaknesses or the things they didn't understand, because they could explain things very well, but they hadn't noticed the difficulties they were going to have when trying to use the structures, the different structures. Now, in that class where I reviewed their reading, I gave my students some exercises for them to do in pairs and as personal work. I also gave them a clock. They couldn't see very well, but the idea was to make them use several structures of the causative use of verbs, and I gave them a board game. Before I gave them the board game for them to play in groups of four, I checked the board game, and it included different structures of the causative verbs, like the ones I already stated. But my students couldn't use the structures. It was very hard for them to actually play the game because it was too challenging for them. Of course, I went around the classroom trying to help them, but that's when I realized that it was over their heads. Well, out of all the structures the program suggested, they could only use the first one. Well, probably you don't see very well. But the only structure they could actually get, and not so well, was the structure have or get something done. The other ones couldn't be acquired. And this is the group. That's my group of students. In fact, they are working on one of the activities I proposed. I had originally planned. So what are the changes? first of all, yeah, I propose to cover this content in 2 different lessons. Each lesson will last 90 minutes, so in the end, the content should be covered initially in 4 pedagogical hours, with a chance to add 2 more pedagogical hours. I'll explain how I will decide on that. Yes, and I decided to actually cover only one structure. It's first year students. It's a group of first year students, and I could see that they couldn't get like any of the other structures. So I decided to actually use only the structure have or get something done. I created different activities and I modified some of the activities that I planned originally for the group. I have had adjusted the materials that I created. I created new material and I added a computer-based or some computer-based material for the class. I also changed the sequence that I followed originally, and I added or I kept formative assessment throughout the entire process, and I added a formative quiz. That formative quiz, which is computer based in this case, in fact cell phone based, will help me decide whether I add or not these 2 pedagogical hours, the 2 additional pedagogical hours. Okay, so my plan that you already have, it's here, my organization of the content, starts by giving the students before the class a handout that contains the theory of the structure they have to use. I erased all the other structures and I only left have or get something done. This time I included the structure of the the structure of the use of have something done, and at the end I included some exercises for them to do beforehand, before they get to the classroom, so that they can actually get to the classroom with questions. Probably this will give them a chance to identify their weaknesses or the difficulties of the use of causative verbs. So that's what they have to do before the class. Now, once they come to the class, I myself will explain the content in front of them, and I will answer possible questions they may have based on the exercises they already did. Those exercises will be checked, of course, and that's how I'm going to notice whether they could get the use of them, the use of causative verbs or not. Then I will give my students a worksheet. Yes, I will give them a worksheet with exercises. Yeah, you already have it, and I will also send it to you. Sorry, and so yeah, I said I was going to explain the content and answer questions. Then I'm going to check the exercises they did at home. And then the third activity will be the following. Students will have to answer the first item of exercises in the handout of exercises, the worksheet that I will be giving them. Of course, I will go around the classroom helping students who are trying to answer new questions that can come up. And then after 10 or 12 minutes, I will check the answers with the whole class. After that, I will divide the class into groups of 3 people, Yeah, 3 people only. And I will have my students play. I would like them to play with the causative use of verbs. Well, causative use of have and get. I will give them this board that I created. I took the idea from the previous one I had used. Remember the one that didn't work? So I changed everything, and it's assigned for students to work with it in groups of 3. At the back of it, they will find the rules. They are self-explanatory, I would say, and they will receive counters and dice. So they have to place the counter on the start, and they have to roll the dice. Let's say the dice falls into 3, or yeah, it has number 3. So they will have to go forward 3 spaces. And there they will find phrases or parts of a sentence that they will have to create using the causative use of have or get. The idea is that the partners have to say whether the sentence created is right or wrong. If the sentence is correct, the student can throw the dice again, roll the dice again, and keep on playing. If the answer is incorrect, they have to go back to start or to the original place where they were when they rolled the dice. Yeah, the idea for me is to give them like 20 or 25 minutes to play with that. Along the way, they will have to help each other. First of all, they will have to create the sentences. The partners will have to evaluate whether the sentences were correct or not, and they will have to try to help each other to get to the point of each sentence. I created the sentences thinking of what is interesting for them, so I even included some movies or characters from movies that I know they like. After that, I will have my students answering the second section of exercises in the worksheet that I have given them. After they answer the exercises, I will check the answers with the whole class, and I will close the lesson going back to the objective of the class. Yes, that will be lesson 1. Lesson 2, we have the exercises. Lesson 2 is different. But before we go to lesson 2, I would like to say that at the end, the idea is also to give them an assignment. And the assignment is to answer the rest of the exercises of the worksheet given in class. Yes, class 2, once they come back, there will be time for telling the aim of the lesson again, and time for me to check their homework as a group. Yes. And then after that, in pairs, I will give each pair a clock. This clock contains the names of places for them to do things. And so the idea is that they can keep a conversation saying, for example, I don't know, Pedro, what are you going to do at 1 o'clock? And Pedro has to say, well, at 1 o'clock, at 1 o'clock here it says Nick's garage. So the person has to create a sentence with the causative use of have or get using that information. So it will be at 1 o'clock, I need to have, or I'm going to have my car repaired at Nick's garage, let's say. And so they had to take turns asking and answering questions using the information of this. Now, I had planned to check that using a roulette. Yes, using a roulette. And the roulette has exactly the same as here, but the good thing about the roulette is that I press a button in the computer and it goes around, and the idea, well, my idea is to pick up each of my students answering uh, um, the exercise by using the prompts given in the roulette. Well, apart from that, I will ask them to transform some sentences using a PowerPoint presentation that I created, the same presentation in which the roulette is. And after that, there will be time to gossip. Yes, I will give my students the picture of a neighbor. And this neighbor is very wealthy. Yes, the neighbor is very wealthy. Here it is. This is the neighbor. This is a very wealthy neighbor. And so they have to talk about this neighbor, saying things this neighbor will have done or will get done in his house. I know that my students are not that creative, and probably they are creative, but when you give them a task like this, they run out of ideas. They cannot think rapidly on ideas to use. So I will provide for them a pile of cards, or a set of cards, a deck of cards for each pair, so that students will get a card and they will say, oh, my neighbor, here there is a prompt. And so they have to they have to say, for example, carnival rides in his backyard. Okay, my neighbor will have carnival rides installed in his backyard. If the answer is correct, the other person will have to take another card and say sentences gossiping about their neighbors. But if the sentences are not okay, the idea is that the partner they are working with can help them get to the right sentence. Yes. After that, the idea is to check this exercise by picking some students to say some of the ideas in front of the class. They can also create their own ideas, but probably at the beginning they will need the cards. After that, there will come a time for me to actually evaluate this and make a decision. What will my students do in those coming 15 minutes? Sorry. Well, they will have to go to Google Forms using their cell phones, and they will have to answer a quiz I created. Yes. Google Forms is usually used for surveys, but it can also be used for quizzes. And students can answer the quizzes through their cell phones. And once they submit the answers, I immediately know the score they got, and this form sends me or gives me the chance to see a spreadsheet with like statistics of their performance. Now, why is this form important? Well, it is important because the results of this form will help me make a decision. Yeah, will help me decide whether I need to add 2 more pedagogical hours to this content or not. It will give my students immediate feedback on their performance as well, and well, it will help all of us to see more or less at which stage they are in connection to the use of causative verbs. Now, after this, the idea is to close the session by revisiting the objectives of the session, and also by establishing conclusions or getting to conclusions. Yes, and well, my idea also is that after or during the closure, I will give my students a piece of homework. Yes, I would like them to use the ideas they shared in this exercise, the clock exercise, to create a dialogue that they will have to present the following session. Yes. And that's it. That's the adaptation of content I created. In terms of what I had previously done, there's an entire modification of the content, the order, the sequence. I added more exercises, but I subtracted. I subtracted the content. I mean, I simplified it. I had to subtract. I had to delete content that was problematic for my students, so that all the effort was dedicated to covering or enhancing the use of just one structure. Yes. So there was addition, but at the same time there was deletion of the problematic structures for the sake of better understanding of at least one of the structures. And the idea is that I can make sure they can actually use the very basic structure, so that with the passing of the time they can get used to the other structures related to the content. And that's it. I'm sorry that video has taken me too long, but this is it. Bye.